Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. Today I've got another atrocity for you from Russia. Now you may or may not already know what this is based off of the title. You may still be a little bit confused, but we're going to go ahead and figure out what exactly is in here. Now, the addresses have been blacked out to protect the innocent. But, as you can see, for those of you who are wondering, yes, I do have my mail delivered from Russia to Big Sam. I'm sure Customs loves that. I don't know how this got past JFK, to be honest. I'm just glad that it did, so I can bring it for you today. So let's go ahead and see what's in here. I've got my trusty AK-74 knife, and we're going to open this guy up. All right, that says attention, so we might want to be careful in case there's, anthrax. I think at this point we always know to be a little bit cautious of anthrax from Russia. Good news is I'm still alive. All right, so we get this sack open here. And, oh, wow, look at that. That is amazing. That looks like a whole bunch of jumbled newspaper. And if you're like Big Sam and you don't have a woman in your life to tell you no, you might stay up all night till at least 2 or 3 in the morning reading all of these weird Russian newspapers. We'll save those for later. Let's go ahead and get this open. I might try to bypass this and see if I can cut through the cardboard here. Not too worried about harming what's in here. I think I'm more worried about what's in here harming me, as usual, with these atrocities from Russia. All right. Oh, baby. Almost got a rope in here. If you're not afraid by now, you probably should be. Ooh, I don't know what that is. Okay. Wow, let's check out one of these newspapers. If you don't live in Russia, you don't really get a chance to look at Russian newspapers very often. Ooh, this is the meat section. Vegetarians look away. Although, I gotta say, there's probably not too many vegetarians that watch this channel. I don't know how many vegetarian people like Mosins. Look at that. Heinz mayonnaise. That's poison. We're going to throw that away. Okay. Come on, baby. Looks like it's in here. Oh. Okay. We'll look at those. Hopefully there's no more mayonnaise advertisements in there, but we can only hope at this point. Alright, so this has been saran wrapped, so I'm going to go ahead and unwrap this guy here. This has been saran wrapped a few times. Wow, there's enough saran wrap on this to circumnavigate the globe. I hope this will fit in my dumpster. So that was the outer saran wrap. And then the inner saran wrap will probably be enough to circumnavigate the moon. Okay. Once you get it started, it's pretty easy. It's kind of like unwrapping one of those Subway sandwiches, if you've ever had one of those. Those are pretty exciting. Oh, baby, we're getting close. We're getting very close. How does this go? All right, so we've gotten to it. Now I can already see that this is really greasy, so I'm gonna be right back. I need gloves. Haha, I've got gloves. Now this is where we do a lot of our gun work, disassembly work. I try to keep it as clean as I can, so I may kind of let this sit on the saran wrap, and I got some big old cleaning patches to go ahead and take off some of the nastiness that appears to be on here. I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. Now, one other problem with not having a woman in your life to tell you no is you can't use her t-shirts to wipe off all this junk. So we're going to substitute these big old cleaning patches. So let's take a look at what we have here. Oh, wow. Look at this abomination. Wow. Look at this. Need to get that in focus there. So at this point, some of you might be asking yourself, what on earth am I looking at? And that's a really good question. So what this actually is, or it appears to be, is a set of World War I Russian Empire used wire cutters. So what was this used for? Well, there's a ton of different things that can be classified in the whole realm of needing to be cut by wire cutters. We have things like barbed wire, non-barbed wire, and another interesting thing which we'll talk about later is things like telegraph lines or things up in the air. Because remember, those were definitely around in World War I. And some rudimentary telephone lines as well, because they did have telephones in World War I. Now, how does this work? Well, you ask really good questions. So we have these two big loops here, as you can see. And the way this is supposed to work is these are threaded. So these are loop onto something, and then you take some sort of a nut and maybe a washer, and you thread those on here so you can secure it and tighten it to whatever you're going to put through this loop here. Now there's a couple things theoretically you can do with this. One would be putting on some sort of a pole, okay, or some sort of a lance. Now in World War I, we'll take a look at some photos later, but in World War I, you might have heard the term dragoon before, especially if you're familiar with Mosins, because there were special Mosins made for dragoons. Now, dragoons were mounted infantry, but what a lot of people don't realize is dragoons, a lot of them in World War I, had these big old lances. And so one of the things they would do would be to mount these wire cutters on the lances. So what does that get you? Well, that gives you really long reach, for one. So let's say you're on a horse, right? And I have this mounted on a lance. I can reach out and I can grab a hold onto some wires and I can cut them. Another great thing for dragoons, since you're on a horse, you're already way up high in the air, having a lance plus being on a horse gives you really tall reach. So let's say you find a telegraph line, an enemy telegraph line in the air. Maybe you're a scout and you've infiltrated enemy lines, and you've located a section of telegraph wire that's a strategic set of telegraph wire, maybe telephone cable somewhere on the ground that needs to be cut. Well, if it's in the air, you can just fasten this to your lance and reach up and cut it. Because you're already on a horse, you have pretty good reach. So that's really interesting. Now, some of these were actually fastened to Mosins, and I'm not exactly sure if this one was. Once I get this better cleaned up, we can certainly try it. The shape, just looking at the shape, it appears to be more of a circular item. This was at least intended to be attached to. So something like a lance would have been more cylindrical, right? But we'll see if this actually works on a Dragoon Mosin, because we have a few of those here laying around we can try this on. Before we do that, I'm going to need to get this cleaned up though, which is going to be a whole nother task entirely. Now, before we do that, one interesting thing in here you might see is, hang on, let me get my pointy device here so I can actually show you. Haha, my toothpick. Okay. So you see in here, we have this coil spring. Why is there a coil spring in here? Well, you ask another good question. Somehow, and I'm trying to figure out how, aha! Sometimes you just have to try. We can see this is actually spring-loaded, which is exactly how this works. So what would happen is you come in here with, you have this little hook, right? And you have these little cutters here, like there. And the goal is you hook this on the wire, and then this is connected to your lance or rifle or what have you. So let's say my finger here is the wire I want to cut. Now I'm not going to do this because I want to keep my finger, but you can pretend that, right? So I hook onto it, and then I pull back, right? And it's spring loaded. And then what will happen is, and this is actually really cool because it still works. You can see the blade here on the inside. It actually protrudes out because of the spring tension. So when you pull it back, what happens is the gap between the two cutters decreases like that. And so eventually you pull hard enough, and it's basically just like a pair of scissors, right? The more force you apply, the closer the blades get together, and then once you apply more force, that's going to give you that cutting force you need to get through whatever you're trying to do. So this is really awesome. Apparently it still works. We actually might be able to test this on something. Now, some of these will have a maker's mark. Some of these actually were developed and engineered by Colonel Gulkovich, who you may have heard of. He designed a really interesting bayonet called, as you could probably imagine, the Gulkovich bayonet, which is, at least in theory, supposed to go on that St. Petersburg cavalry carbine we've showed a few times on the show. However, I'm actually kind of skeptical of that, and I'll talk about that more in an upcoming video. But some of these will be actually marked Colonel Gulkovich. This one is not. I've seen some really interesting diagrams of these, and it seems, we'll take a look at those once we get this cleaned up in another video and actually get to try this guy out. But it seems there's maybe like 6 main different designs for this general concept of wire cutters. Some of them were to be mounted on a Mosin-Nagant rifle, and some of them were to be mounted on some sort of pole arm or a lance or something like that. Now, what's really awesome is I've never actually seen one of these in America before. In fact, I've actually never seen one of these hardly in even workable condition. There's a few that'll come up for sale you might see on eBay, but those tend to be really horrible condition. They were in the ground for like 100 years, and they're in what we would call relic condition, not really usable anymore. This one, while it's still rusty and has some pitting, I mean, the thing still works. This is awesome. We just don't get a chance to take a look at things like this here in America, much less actually put them to the test, because the problem is here in America, we have most of the Mosins, especially the Dragoon models, that we can try out something like this on. If not this, then another one that was meant for it. And in Europe, where a few of these still exist, specifically in Russia, guns are way more regulated and hard to get a hold of. So it's nice when both worlds can actually come together. And that's what we try to do on this channel. We like to bring you a lot of interesting relics from the East that maybe you haven't seen before. You can see here on the back, it actually looks quite nice. Not a whole lot of pitting. Most of the pitting is on this side, but I mean, it's really just surface pitting, and I mean, all these screws are still here, and it looks like this thing actually is going to work. Now,
one of the other things we're going to need to do, right, is find some washers. And I'm not sure what thread pitch this was. This was developed pre-metric system, so this might have been made off of like British tooling, like Mosin's were. So it might be inches. We don't really know. So that's something else we'll have to investigate. We'll get this guy cleaned up a little bit. I think this is going to clean up rather nicely. Be interesting to see what we can get this to work on. If not a Mosin, then some sort of improvised pole arm device thing. I'll have to take a closer look at some pictures of exactly what sort of lances might have been used by dragoons. And I don't know, maybe we can come up with something interesting. But either way, whatever this is supposed to go on, I'll also try to do a little bit more research to figure out exactly what this particular model was made for, and what it was designed to do, right? Because maybe it was specifically for barbed wire or telegraph lines, or maybe it was just developed to be sort of an all-around, all-purpose kind of a thing. We can see it working in there. That's pretty cool. But it's just something really fascinating that we don't get to see very often. Another thing you might have noticed, let me get my pokey thing here again. There is a W, it appears. Now, it could also be an M. Now, how do we tell? Well, this is where things get fun. W is not in the Russian alphabet, so I tend to think this is an M. Now, with the Gulkovich ones, you'll have a whole like name and whatever written out for him. This one, I don't see anything like that. I don't actually see any other markings on this anywhere. And we could be fairly sure of that because while there is some surface pitting, there's really not enough. You don't see anything there. There's really not enough to take away any big markings. So it's hard to say. We can try to disassemble this, however, I'm a little apprehensive to try to take this apart. It seems like it's working, so we may just leave the internals of this system be for now. This thing is crazy. Man, could you imagine being in World War I and being tasked to go take down enemy or German or Austro-Hungarian telegraph lines with this thing? Well, one thing I can tell you, this big ol' hunk of metal was built back in the day when men were men and women were too. Just incredible. Interesting time capsule. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this is going to clean up, because like I said, I've just never seen anything like this before, and I'm really excited to get to bring something like this to y'all. So I hope y'all enjoyed this unboxing of this wire cutter thing from World War I. Imperial Russia. This did actually come from Russia, which is pretty cool. I don't know how this is in such good condition. I'm just glad it is, so I can bring it to y'all today. If y'all are interested in more weird Mosin Nagant content and strange obscurities from the East, please consider subscribing. Let me know what y'all would like to see next, and let me know if y'all have any prayer requests. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.